Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to give you a brief welcome before we get started. I'm Maya Elenevsky, the Events and Outreach Manager here at the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society with the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education. The ACMHE is a multidisciplinary academic association with a membership of over 700 educators, staff, students, and researchers committed to the transformation of higher education through contemplative methods. The ACMHE is an initiative of the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. I'd like to welcome you to our April 2020 Contemplative Education webinar, Cultivating Compassionate Teaching During the Coronavirus, with Mirabai Bush, Lenwood Hayman, and Paul Wapner. Now I'd like to give you a little background about our presenters. Mirabai Bush is co-founder and a senior fellow at the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. She is a co-author with Daniel Barbazat of Contemplative Practices in Higher Education and co-author with Ram Das of Walking Each Other Home, Conversations on Loving and Dying. She leads a mindfulness orientation for first-year Amherst College students and last taught in the Smith School of Social Work. Lenwood Hayman is an associate professor of behavioral health sciences in the School of Community Health and Policy at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. His work focuses on using contemplative practices to cultivate community cohesion as a means of health promotion. Paul Wapner is a professor of global environmental politics in the School of International Service at American University in Washington, D.C. His work focuses on environmental ethics, climate suffering, contemplative environmentalism, and activism. His newest book is Wildness Over, will be available beginning May 1st. We are so grateful to have them here with us today. Please welcome our wonderful speakers.
Hi, everyone. This is Mirabai Bush. Welcome to this circle, this virtual circle. We keep hearing that what we're all missing so much is community during this time. I know I am. And so we're hoping you experience this event as a community of us all coming together with similar concerns. So we're going to talk about contemplative and compassionate teaching in the time of coronavirus, how to teach now, how to learn from it, how to care for our students, for our institutions, and for ourselves. So Len's put together a really amazing group of slides, and we're going to start by looking at those. And I invite you, while you're looking at them, to sit comfortably and relax your body. And as you're looking, notice what arises for you. Especially notice what kinds of emotions arise for you. And the slides just take 3 minutes. But notice what happens for you. Because this is setting the context for the conversation that follows, and the really important part of this event, which is to hear from you all ways in which you're dealing with it and ways in which you think the center could serve you better as we go forward. So before I start them, just sitting there in your chair and feeling your feet on the floor, dropping your shoulders, feeling relaxed, and take a few deep breaths, breathing in and breathing out. And letting go of all the concerns that you've had until right this moment, letting them go for now as we bring ourselves into this circle with the focus on teaching and compassion. So, Maya, would you start the slides? Lynn, thank you for putting those together. They're amazing, taking us through the sorrows and the fears and into that wildness of bringing our work life and our home life all together as one. and, and then some of the ways that people have found contemplative practices help them get through it. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
Welcome. It was I mentioned this in the email to you all that even putting those slides together was a bit of a contemplative practice for myself because I was able to see what I was feeling and how I was, what it looked like for me. If I could organize it or arrange it into pictures, what it would look like, starting off with the initial catalyst of, the virus and then, flowing into what our experience is now, working from home, teaching from home, both our um, uh, students that we had planned to be teaching and for myself, students who I had not planned to be teaching in regards to my two sons. And then moving into the most important aspect of it is how we're maintaining ourselves, right? And so in thinking about what the experience has been, for myself, it's been getting used to sharing a narrow space with folks who and this is my family, but we haven't had the privilege to spend so much time together. And so with that in mind, with the concept of sharing space and not being able to spend as much time with family as we've been able to, or maybe as we would like, I want to welcome everybody here. I'm really grateful to have this privilege to be with you all now, even if it's virtually. Most of the folks that know me know how big of a fan and a proponent and a constructor of community I am. And so any way to be able to keep in touch with you all is a privilege. Being able to check in on each other is a must now. When I think about what's really been the primary gist of the experience for me, initially it started out as frustration, but primarily because I didn't feel as if I had a frontline role in being able to address, what's happening. Yes, I am in the School of Community Health and Policy, but being required to stay at home, admittedly, took some adjusting for me. I had to get used to that idea and the concept of being at home and being an elementary school teacher before I got to my role of being a college professor. So in thinking about my personal context with the virus, it's primarily just been making sure I stay mindful of the importance of this time that I am getting to slow my life down and remembering or being mindful of the importance of spending this time with my sons and spending this time with the rest of my family when we're all home here together.
Mirabai, I'm not sure we can hear your microphone.
Sorry. I coughed before and I didn't want everybody to panic and thinking I was about to be carried out on a stretcher. So yeah, it's been really similar for me. I have really noticed the how the simple things have come back. I mean, I've been going on a walk every day, on the same walk. And so now I'm noticing it's spring in New England, sort of. And so I'm noticing every day little tiny bit of change, you know, and there's sprigs of things that are coming up. And I, you know, my life had gotten not, it's just there was a lot more happening in it, with a lot of more interaction with people and traveling here and there. And I realized that I hadn't had that experience day to day of these, you know, small, simple things being present for me. And those are very, I find those very calming, so that then I can do the other work I want to do from a deeper place. You know, I just also am looking at living with mystery. We really, you know, didn't we think we sort of knew how everything was going to unfold? We knew there would be surprises, but we really, even though I have a lot of friends who are epidemiologists, because I was part of Seva Foundation, and I've been hearing them talk about this, or some version of this, for years. And I still was really, you know, mostly at most levels, unprepared that this could really happen. So, yeah. And then I just, my biggest frustration is that I can't see my granddaughter, and that I feel like something could happen to her and I couldn't even be there. So anyhow, we wanted to share these thoughts so that you would know that just like you, we're all going through it. Paul?
Yeah, so I'm also very privileged and honored to be here. I'm kind of freaking out, to be perfectly frank. I go up and I go down, and it's pretty strange feeling that humanness. I guess I thought I was over it or something. I thought somehow I kind of mastered being in lots of equanimity and so forth, and yet this has really thrown me. It's thrown me at an abstract level and a very personal level. I shared with Lenny and Mirabai yesterday, or a couple days ago, that one of the most visceral experiences I've been having with this is that sadly my son contracted the virus, and he has it. He's doing great. He's doing wonderfully, thank goodness. But that cut close to the bone, boy. It was like, and close to the heart, and especially because I'm in New Mexico. He's in Boulder, Colorado, and being unable to be with him while he was going through that was also just something I didn't expect. I figured I'm capable, something goes wrong with one of my kids, somehow I could be there, not as a savior, or because that's a bit above my pay grade, but just that, just to be able to do that. And so that really hurt. And it was kind of like a stone in my heart that just fell down. And so, and I continue to worry about him and my daughter and my wife and friends and so forth. So there's that aspect of it. And another aspect in terms of the ups and downs is my heart just goes out to those who are living on the edge, who are experiencing this. Many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And now they're having to be home with their families, doing childcare, taking care of a million things, and worrying about if the economic foundation, let alone the other foundations of their lives, are going to disappear soon. And that really hurts. You know, in Taos, we have a food pantry, and it serviced 1,500 people on Thursday. There's only 7,000 people in Taos. So so something's going on. The final thing I'll just add is that that there's also this strange dissonance where I'm scared, concerned, and so forth. And there's lots of moments of sort of joy. It's strange how you could be in the world, and so the world seems to be coming apart, and yet my own day-to-day experience can have real moments of, I was snowshoeing in the mountains yesterday, and I don't know, how does that go along with the virus? So, but that's where I'm at, among other things. So I'll put it back to you.
Yeah. Maya, can we have our first question? If not, there it is.
Just to bring everyone in, as we were preparing for this webinar, we decided to come up with a few questions to help kind of guide us, the three of us, through a discussion and to really contextualize even deeper what our experience has been, and possibly to begin to answer some of the questions that you all may have for us. So in regards to this first question, what practices have been supportive to me during this time? One of the most difficult things for me has been having to kiss my wife goodbye every morning as she goes into work in the hospital. She is an acute care physical therapist, and she now sees COVID-19 patients 2 or 3 times a week in a very specific unit. And when the reality hit that she was going to have to be on that front line that I spoke of earlier, there was something that happened to me, and I quite honestly wasn't aware of it until maybe a week later, maybe even 2 weeks later. And I realized that there was this, and Paul, this, is similar to what you were feeling in regards to your son. There's just general helplessness. She is an amazingly strong and capable individual, so it's not like I was planning to, come in and be her superhero or anything like that. But at the same time, just knowing that, she was going to be at risk made it difficult for me to stay at home and kind of keep things together on this end. And some of the practices that I have been engaging in, first things first, it was quite helpful that our sons, who are 9 and 7, their elementary school phys ed teacher sent home like this little list of exercises that they can do every day. So we kind of started a makeshift gym and yoga studio. So I started leading us through just gentle movements and or maybe not so gentle when it comes to them, leading them through brief sitting meditations to help them calm down and focus when it comes time to do their work. But originally, even that was not helping me to really calm down and to settle. And if I'm to be completely honest, here we are, 3 weeks into this, and I'm still not settled. I'm still having a very, very difficult time focusing on the work that I have to do, focusing on preparing things for the students for the classes that I teach. But the mainstay for me has been music, as usual. And today, when we got the news that Bill Withers passed away, and I don't think that it was from, the coronavirus or anything like that, but when he passed away, when we got message rather that he passed away, rather than being sad or being too sad, the song that immediately popped into my head was A Lovely Day, which is an amazing song from him. And I began to hum it, and it reminded me of just how significant having practices are to helping us deal with what we're experiencing right now, right? We don't know how much worse this is going to get. So if we don't have practices yet, there's no better time to develop a practice or to develop a toolbox of practices. And unlike the old adage of practice making perfect, practice does not make us perfect. It just makes us better prepared, right? So what I'm finding is that my previous practices of listening to music, of singing, of quiet meditations, guided meditations, going on walks with my family, going on walks by myself when I need the quiet. Those have been the main things that have been keeping me as sane as I can be, during these insane times.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, I've just been relying on those practices I've been doing for years, and the basic mindfulness practice of breathing and watching what arises and letting go. I find that letting go is the kind of most important single direction for me at this time. So many things arise, so much, everything from worries about myself and my family to, just the real pain, as Paul was saying, of thinking about people in really desperate situations or even somewhat desperate situations. Everybody's worried. We don't know what, even after the virus is gone, lots of people aren't going to have jobs or money. So I just find that, keeping it really simple, doing a breath practice, letting go of what arises for now, and just coming back into this moment. Because in this moment, right now, it's pretty great. I mean, here we all are together. And that different, what I know from my life is that different practices work at different times for you. So, try different things to, and walking is great. And we have to walk anyhow to get some exercise. And I've been using a Thich Nhat Hanh practice while walking with the one step, I have arrived. Next step, I am home. And then you're home wherever you are. It's really great practice. So, Paul.
Yeah, listening to you, Mirabai, it reminds me of a conversation we had a number of years ago where we were talking about virtual reality, and I was saying how it makes me dizzy and I get all out of place. And you said, well, that was for you the practice of living through the 60s and kind of letting go in a big way, allowed you to kind of stomach it. But for me, I guess one of the things that's really challenging is that I find myself, again, wishing that I was a different person in the sense that I find that I'm doing this what if all the time now. What if, for example, my university doesn't open in the fall? What if the virus goes on for 2 more years? What if, I have no money? And it's not a lot of fun. And what I'm finding right now is that the most important practice for me really is my sitting practice. And kind of the 2 aspects of that. One is simply, as Mirabai was saying, sort of allowing thoughts to surface, allow fears to surface, and so forth. And then through the practice, allowing myself to see them as kind of circumscribed things that are in a larger context or in a larger frame of awareness. So that image, I guess, that meditators use, that thoughts are like clouds going through the sky, and the blue sky behind the clouds is the overall awareness. I'm finding that really helpful now in terms of letting go and not getting caught in these what ifs. The second piece of the practice, which seems to be very helpful right now, is simply a kind of a non-grasping, even toward thought, that there's a tendency with such uncertainty, to want to grasp onto things. And even in sitting, sort of like a solution, like we should just do this. And trying to just kind of notice when that gripping happens and let go. These are times which are just incredibly uncertain, and yet on some level we're told it's always like this. And so the practice, that practice for me anyway, it's a practice I've been doing for many years, and I'm finding it's its value is really obvious at this moment.
Maya, we have a new question.
Mirabai, this was your fantastic offering of a question. This was definitely one of my favorites. What are we learning from this experience, and/or what could we be learning from it? Some of the things that immediately jumped out to me, especially being a behavioral health scientist and being in the field of public health. Understanding the significance of health disparities prior to the pandemic, and understanding the significance of societal disparities, and how there were groups of people who had to exist in spaces with a sense of vulnerability that only they were able to understand, right? Despite the attempts to point out how we have been marginalized and how we suffer from microaggressions and various aggressions against our race, our gender expression, our sexual preference, our religion, our creed. Now we have an incident that is making a far, far, far greater impact on people from that vulnerability standpoint than our words apparently have been making before. And what I mean by that is there are individuals who are now understanding what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to be ill-equipped, what it means to be under-resourced, not ill-equipped, but under-resourced, right? What it means to to experience disinvestment and having to figure out how to survive, not necessarily to thrive yet, but having to figure out how to survive day to day with that specter of vulnerability omnipresent, right? Always at our back, always on our shoulders, always in our face, right? So what I'm learning is we now have this opportunity that if we did not realize just how vulnerable certain individuals living in the United States are, certain populations around the world are, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to understand the ubiquity of vulnerability at this point, right? We have individuals who are coming face to face, as Paul mentioned earlier, with hunger for the first time. We have individuals who are also coming face to face with job insecurity who were white collar workers, right? We have individuals coming face to face with just how important their jobs and their roles are, even though they had previously been deemed as menial positions, such as grocery store workers or delivery people, right? Now we have the opportunity to realize just how important it is for all of us to appreciate each other's perspectives, and not only to rest in that appreciation, but to make sure that we are doing as much as we can do as a community to take care of each other. What we're experiencing right now, what we're learning right now is that in the United States, we are existing in a society that is still attempting to divide this into a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. And it is neither. It is both, if it's anything. This is not an issue that should be politicized, right? Because as we are focusing on who gets what and why who doesn't get what they need, people are suffering unnecessarily. And so my hope is that we take away from this that divided we fall. Divided we fall. The more mindful we are of how we can provide services to each other, and this is even more specific for us in the professoriate. The more mindful we can be to the services that we can provide each other, and the simple compassion as a service that we can provide to each other, the better we all will be.
Well, now I just want to sit back and learn from what you just told us. I'm just going to say one thing. That was really great. That the difference between just kind of going through this and bearing up with it, the difference between that and understanding that the most difficult times in our lives are times when we have the potential for learning the most. That suffering is where we grow. And most of the time we do everything we can to avoid it. And now here we are. And so that's why I think the central question now is, what can we learn from this? Why is this happening? Not just to each one of us, but the whole planet. What should we be learning from this so that we can go forward in a way that doesn't cause more suffering, like you are talking about? So that's the question I'm holding, and the appreciation of knowing that this is something we can learn from. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you guys are saying. So I'm sort of sitting with that a little bit. One thing that I think we're learning something about our capability in one sense. I mean, what's kind of amazing is that much of the world has shut down in 3 weeks. I mean, talk about collective action. I mean, I can't even get, family to eat at the same time, and meanwhile, we got the planet going from, this incredible frenetic, productivist agitation, really. Yeah. And in a matter of time, we've turned on a dime where, I do a lot of work on climate change. And so I think to myself, wow, maybe there's also potential here too. Like, what if we threw $1 trillion into converting out of fossil fuels? And what if we did it as quickly as we're doing it? And what if we found a way for each of us to kind of reduce our carbon output? So there's a little bit of excitement there for me about how quickly we've moved, and there's a certain sense of collectivity too, a sort of, as you were speaking, Len, about sort of collective vulnerability, recognizing that this is not just about me. And also something that you said once offline, Len, too, about not just me, but this is also an opportunity to learn what's most important to us. There's almost an existential moment, which it's like, okay, what do I do with my time? What's most valuable to me? I find myself reaching out to people I haven't spoken with in a long time because I feel like, wow, now's the time. If not now, when? And I mentioned you, Len, because Len wrote an email to us about productivity, rethinking what productivity means in this time. And I had a colleague who wrote me, and she said, I'm not going to publish anything for 5 months now. And I was like, interesting criterion of what this time's about. And if I could share, Len suggested maybe the new meaning of productivity is, can we keep our shit together? Can we just come together? And maybe that's enough. So this is a moment, and I think just the question, what can we learn from this, is huge. And I think that that's a question we also can bring into our classroom together collectively. What is this moment calling us to sort of awaken to?
Yeah. Maya?
The role of a contemplative educator in this is what we are doing right now. Making time, taking time, and occupying space within our day to not only check in with each other, but to also encourage each other and to also remind each other that despite this new experience of collective vulnerability, there is expertise embedded in all of us, that we can now enable that will allow us to overcome this current challenge, right? So as a sci-fi nerd, I think to movies like Independence Day, right, where there's this foreign threat that has come to the planet and everybody bands together to fight this, foreign threat of. And if this isn't an example of Independence Day, I don't know what is, right? And the independence that I speak of isn't necessarily from some new sense of, it's not necessarily about how we're trapped inside our new experiences, so to say, how, we can't go to work or we can't congregate in large groups or really in groups at all anymore. As a contemplative educator, I see it as a privilege to be the individual holding the sign that says, accept this for what it is. This is a threat. This is a monumental wake-up call. This is the rudest alarm clock we've ever had. But with this privilege to now enter into acceptance, we can begin down this path of healing, of overcoming this, of, again, acknowledging, recognizing that we have each and every single one of us, we have something that needs to be contributed in this moment. The students that take our classes have insight to contribute to this moment. As the contemplative educator, I believe it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we set those virtual spaces that if we had not given them the encouragement that they needed when we had the privilege to be in their faces, that now that we're in these virtual spaces, we are reminding them, hey, listen, this is all brand new for all of us. Just as I have something to contribute to us overcoming this, so too do you. But before we can get to that, we have to accept that this is where we are, that this is uncomfortable, but this is not impossible for us to overcome.
Thanks. Well, I think the contemplative educator is going to have a huge role going forward. I just think it's clear that it's so important at this time, that it's so hard to learn in the normal way right now because we're so agitated and all the things we're talking about. And so contemplative knowing seems to me like our best bet at this time. I some years ago, it's like 2009 or something, we had the, that was the time of the bird flu, or they thought the bird flu was coming. And a friend of mine who's an epidemiologist and had worked on the film Contagion, and others there were from WHO and CDC, and they were all, and a lot of tech guys. It was held in Silicon Valley. It was this big meeting about what we could do, how we can get ready, and all of that. And he invited me to come, and I said, why? I just said, sure, I'll come. And then I got there, and I realized everybody else was like deep into public health. And I said, why did you invite me to this? But it became really clear that, as I talked and led a few practices, that all those scientists and others had recognized, that the importance of that in order to, as you said in your talk, Len, last summer, in order for our immune systems to be robust, that we really have to get, we have to drop into a calmer, clearer space than just reacting to all this. So I say all that to say that I think these things that we've been doing for some time, ways of bringing it into the classroom, I think are going to be, or are right now and are going to be more important than ever. And I always go back to Arthur Zience's work, who is really the godfather of this. And in his book, Contemplative Inquiry, he lists characteristics of contemplative inquiry. I just read them. This is why we need to keep doing our own practice so that we can genuinely bring a contemplative environment into the classroom by simply being there. Respect, gentleness, intimacy, participation, vulnerability, transformation, illumination, and insight. And they sound maybe inflated, but actually all of that comes out in whatever degree from a contemplative approach to teaching and learning. So, Paul?
The role of a contemplative educator, to me, I guess what's going on most is sort of asking the question, is what I'm teaching and what I've been teaching, is it relevant right now? And trying to find the kind of touchstone of relevance at this moment. I find that I teach best when I teach what I most want to know. So I'm not very good if I go in and I kind of want to just take students from here to there. But I try to go in with questions that I'm really asking myself and use the classroom a little bit as an exploration. And what I really want to know now is sort of the profundity of this moment. What is this moment offering us, and so forth? And so for me, I think part of our role as educators is to bring that into the classroom, bring our own curiousness, our own sensitivities. And I guess another way of saying that is that the Association for Contemplative Mind has always encouraged us to kind of be real in the classroom. And I feel like, yes, we are live now. This is it. And I think we owe it to our students and we owe it to ourselves to go in and be both a source of guidance, because I know our students are looking to us partly in their lives for sort of how do we navigate these times, but also to be clear about our own unknowing and our own vulnerabilities and so forth. So I guess to me, it's the challenge now is not letting go of the material we want to sort of, that's still important in the world. I do environmental studies and I feel like, this is still incredibly relevant, but how do I do that in a way that speaks to the kind of refinement of this challenge in a meaningful way?
Great. Oh, there is another question. Yeah.
What in-class practices might we recommend for this unique time? And then how do we sustain students' attention and interest in contemplative practices online? Well, the first part of the question in terms of practices we might recommend, Paul, I think you just nailed it. I think you hit it on the head in terms of giving ourselves, first things first, as the quote unquote teachers, giving ourselves permission to not know everything when we enter into the classroom. And the way that we do that, showing up and being vulnerable, there's a great level of insecurity that we all work through in our lives, right? And having the privilege of having, these really high degrees and working at, prestigious institutions and this, that, and the third, it brings with it this sense of knowingness, right? And even as contemplative educators, some of us, it's very easy for us to rely on what we've published in books or in articles or wherever, talks that we've given. and to rely on that as what shows up best and most profoundly when we, enter into the classroom. But to me, one of the simplest practices, contemplative practices that we can engage in when we go into the classroom is understanding that we are all beginners at this point. At the beginning of every class, we are all beginners. We might have a general idea as to where we want the class to go, but that is such a fantastic quote. Paul, I wrote it down. I teach best when I teach what I want to know. Going into class and having that kind of a perspective, I think, is one of the most profound contemplative practices as an educator right now that we can have. As students, something as simple as breath counting, right? Counting your breaths and having a set destination of being able to take 10 complete breaths in a row is a practice. And the way that it helps us to understand the importance and the significance in restarting and starting anew is because what happens when we are counting our breaths, there are distractions that are around us depending on where it is that we are, entering into this breath counting practice. So what can happen is there's something that happens externally that takes us off of our count. We're like, oh, got to start over. Internally, our thoughts serve as the exact same thing, right? When our thoughts arise and some random thought comes up and it takes our mind away from the count, then we have to remember to start over again. As a means of understanding the importance and the significance and the privilege in being able to start over again, I think that breath counting is one of the most important practices, because if this is all over, once this is all over, what is going to happen is what? We're going to have to start all over again. There is no blueprint necessarily that is specific for how we go about rebuilding things that have been stopped after, everything is done. So I spent a lot of time on that first part. I'll leave the second part or whatever to Mirabai and Paul.
Oh, is this? I don't know the answer to that second part. I think I'm going to have to hear it from people later in the reflections and questions. But I haven't taught that much online, and I've been teaching a lot online these days. But I don't really have the feedback yet to know how effective it's been. But I was thinking more about that when. And I'm sure nobody does, we don't want to underestimate the stress on students now and when they come back into the classroom in the fall, if that happens. That I think that for a while, deep relaxation practices, breath counting, or, whatever it is that to do with your students, I think that's going to be really important. I spent years at the center and writing that book with Dan and all about really looking at what are the appropriate practices for your discipline and for the cultural makeup of your students and all of that is really important. But I have a feeling now that everybody really needs some in whatever form it takes, some kind of deep relaxation for them to be able to open up to, because, without open mind, very hard to learn. So I'll just say that I teach the incoming Amherst College first years. And so they're usually 65 sign up for the yoga and mindfulness. It's a 3-day intensive. I do it with someone else. And so for 3 days, they're doing all these different practices. And at the end, and I teach with someone who's a really good teacher. At the end, we ask them, what really worked for you, what you benefit from. And they'll say this and that. But the biggest thing they say is yoga nidra, which is, deep relaxation during which many of them fall asleep. So But they are under so much stress getting into Amherst College that they're desperate for some time, quiet time that way. So I just offer that for our future with our students.
It's so funny you talk about that they fall asleep. Wouldn't it be interesting if, like, in each of our classes, we could have a little nap time?
Yeah.
We all, lie down. For me, I guess the practice that over the years that has consistently felt meaningful, and it feels very meaningful at this moment, is that I start every class with a check-in, which means that we're generally sitting in a circle, but they can be done with a large class as well. And the question just is, what is alive for us right now? And we just go around and each person speaks hopefully lean of speech, but shares what's alive for them with the assumption that whether we acknowledge that or not, it's in the classroom. And so giving voice to it allows us to kind of come to the moment and be open. And so I find, it just seems like in this moment where people are feeling very differently, that practice seems important also because you can watch a class over time. So here's how people are doing now. Here's how and there's not a reaction to each person. It's just each person speaks and listens. But should we move into the practice?
Yep, it's time. Oh, yes, it's time. And then after that, we're going to do questions. Not just, questions and reflections from anybody who's part of this big circle of 231 people. Okay.
Great. So I volunteered actually to offer a short practice to move us into these questions and comment period. And first, I just want to apologize to my two colleagues. I said that I would do a practice of releasing anxiety and fear, but it seems that something else is possible given how we're together here. And so what I wanted to do was to explore a practice where, there's 230 of us literally together now, staring into our screens, looking at the same silly three faces. And is there a way to be here now? Can we bring some awakeness to how we're here? And so to begin, I would just ask us if you're able just to lift our arms and stretch up to the sky, maybe interlace the fingers, and just do a couple circles. And just recognize that right now 230 folks are doing this. We're all looking pretty strange right now. Okay, and if we could just release the arms, and I invite us, if you're comfortable, to close our eyes. Just come to a sense of being here. If we're sitting in this chair, in this body, at this time of day, and just be in touch with our breath. And I'd ask us to just now be aware of what's going on. Here we are sitting with our eyes closed in a webinar with a whole bunch of other people interested in contemplative pedagogy and yearning together for ways to navigate these times. We're different people. We're different classes. Some of us are salaried. Some of us are non-salaried. Some of us are teachers. Some of us are students. We're of different races. We're of different gender identifications. We're in different stations of life. And yet here we are together. We're also in different places. My voice is coming from Taos, New Mexico. Mirabai is coming from Amherst. and Len's is coming from Baltimore, and everyone else on this webinar is somewhere else. And yet, we're here. And all of us also right now are engaged with many concerns and many worries. Concerned about our own health, concerned about the health of our families and friends, concerned about economic insecurity and the disappearance of things that used to be routine that are no longer. Our ability simply to reach out and touch and be with another human being. Many of us are engaged in childcare or new kinds of work just to keep going. And there's the joys, those moments of satisfaction, stopping the world. And for all of us, there's simply the unknown, the mystery, the unfolding that's taking place that none of us can see far enough into the future and package so that we can settle. So just allowing those thoughts and feelings to emerge, and let's just imagine them as our edges right now. Our edges, this is where we meet uncertainty. In yoga, when we move in a position, we touch an edge, and if we push too far, there'll be pain. And in this moment of our edginess, if we push too far, there'll be despair and anger and disappointment. But if we push too little into that edge, also we're less alive. And in this moment, it's a sense maybe of avoidance and maybe superficiality and not touching deeply enough what's going on. In all this, we could simply say to ourselves as 250 of us are together cogitating and thinking about these things, we could just simply label it thinking and let that whole thing go. Again, just thinking and letting the whole thing go. And yet something else is also possible. That we can sit with these edges together. So let us not wish them away. In this time, let us not yearn for a different time, not even an end to the virus. Let's try not to resist or brace against these edges, nor romanticize them and belittle them. In short, let us not look away at this moment, but let us look together. Let us not feel away from these, but let us feel together. This is our moment. We can live with compassion, we can live with strength, and mostly we can live together. So I invite us when we're ready, we can open our eyes and come back, and we'll move into a time to hear your comments and questions. So thank you.
That was sweet, Paul. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
So if you haven't already submitted your questions or comments, you can feel free to do so now. We did have many questions and feedback throughout the webinar, so I have shared that with our presenters, and whenever you're ready, we can begin responding to some of those.
Maya?
Yes.
So I see several questions here. Are these the ones that you sent me? Or these are
Yes.
this is the whole list for everybody?
Nope, I sent you each some questions, and of course you can feel free to answer them yourself or pose them to Paul or Lenwood as well.
Len, do you want to start?
Yeah. One. My first question is from Catherine Dillian, and it's a fantastic question because it's one that we in our department in our school have been sitting with. So our School of Community Health and Policy at Morgan State University has multiple departments in it, and all of those departments obviously have something to do with health in some sort of preparation for engaging in the practice of health. And what happens with that is that because of the interactions that we will because of the quality or the type of interactions that we will ultimately have, or that the students will ultimately have with patients or with clients or with their students, we have competencies to which we have to adhere to make sure that the students are as prepared as they can possibly be. They have these competencies that we have to address each and every single class, each and every time we give this class, I should say, to make sure that the students are adequately prepared. So Catherine's question was, or is, how do we balance a sense of classroom rigor with compassion, especially in areas such as health sciences in which competencies are so important, even non-negotiable? And what happens is when we think of something as rigid and non-flexible as competencies, it makes it easier for us to structure our classroom that way. And what that basically means is when we go into teaching, when we go into providing instruction with the expectation or with the intention even to adhere to these competencies, what tends to happen is because of how strict and occasionally unyielding these competencies are, we think that we as the instructors or the teachers have to be just as strict and just as unyielding. But it's very important, I think, for us to keep in mind is that we are the designers of the syllabi, right? We are the designers of the class, of the instruction. Now is the time for us to engage our creativity in how we can look at the edges of the competencies, to use Paul's language. How can we look at the edges of the competencies and make sure that the way that we are delivering the instruction stretches to those edges, make sure that we address those competencies, but we do it in a way that is meaningful and that resonates with the students who take our classes, right? We have, those of us in the health sciences now have a real life moving example of the different ways that we will be able to, and we will be required to engage once we, are out in our careers, so to say. Our students are out in our careers. So when we juxtapose the competencies to what's actually happening now, how relevant are some of those competencies to what we are experiencing right now? I can say that yesterday I had a Zoom training for the therapy team at my wife's hospital. And one of the main things that their director mentioned was, I am most concerned with your health. I am most concerned with how you are doing right now. I'm not worried about how many patients you see. I'm not worried about your productivity. I'm worried about you as the individual. How can we as teachers, as instructors, instill that in the students that take our classes to maximize the importance of self-care? Because the way that we take care of ourselves is the way that we take care of our clients, our patients, and our students. How can we take those competencies and we make them more compassionate? We are the starting point for a lot of our for all of our classes, competencies included, right? Making sure that we understand that first we are the beings that have to be compassionate, and we, go through the practices that we have. There are practices abound that Paul offered, that Mirabai offered, that I've mentioned. How do we maintain practices to cultivate compassion and to maintain compassion within ourselves, to then be able to teach that, to teach compassionately to our students? What if we leaned more into the compassion than the competencies? What if we were more focused on cultural compassion than cultural competency, right? Or, making sure that we adhere to these rules. So that's, what I have to say about that.
These are wonderful questions, very, really challenging. And I don't know all the answers, but I'll just contribute. This one I love, from Craig Milewski. This is a great beginning. Rewilding our lives. Paul, that's probably an expression but I hadn't heard it before. I love it. Rewilding our lives. It seems that this is an opportunity to rediscover the natural rhythms as individuals, as local communities, and as a global community. Any thoughts how we can come to a place of humility, reverence, and gratitude? It's a huge question. And I don't know what you teach. And of course you would allow, you to address this through the discipline that you're working with. But I will say about gratitude, I find now that I've been doing the gratitude practices in the last week or so. I mean, I've known them for a long time, but I've been doing them because there's some days when I just feel there's so much negativity and fear. So I find myself doing basic, simple gratitude practices of bringing to mind, 4 or 5 things that I'm grateful for today, right now, and then sensing how that feels in my body, and then trying to keep that with me during the day, that even when things are looking so difficult, I can remember that there are things in my life that I'm so grateful for. And it's an easy practice for students. Doesn't require them to do anything that they would think was strange. They're just thinking about their lives and what in their lives is that they appreciate. So you might be able to expand that, into thinking socially and globally. But I know that to begin with, if for students, that can be a really helpful, really simple, and really helpful practice you could do in any classroom. Paul, do you want to respond to this one too? I really love the question about the natural rhythms as individuals, local communities, and a global community. How this time could help us tune into those in the way that Indigenous people originally were so tuned?
Yeah, well, it actually connects with the question that was sent to me that the question was that there's lots of ecologically minded people who have been anticipating a kind of civilizational dismantling, and what are the possibilities for this moment to be one of transformation rather than a kind of a digging in deeper. And I think that, and I'll connect it to rewilding in just a moment, but I think that that's also an amazing opportunity at this point in time, or not even opportunity, responsibility, that as this unfolds, and I mean, the last thing we want to do is go back to normal, right? I mean, the normal has been incredibly unjust. It's been incredibly destructive. I mean, we've been, and I would say almost everybody on this webinar is privileged to kind of live through these times. But even in our privilege, it hasn't been, you know, we know that the world needs work. And so how can we ensure that as things are disintegrating and changing, that we can be there also as stewards toward a new normal, and hopefully not normal actually, but just a new phase in civilization. And I think that's our work. And I think the rewilding piece comes in for me personally, because I think that one of the reasons that we have been so dysfunctional in many ways, I'm not saying it's across the board, there's lots of fabulously gorgeous, compassionate things about the world, but our dysfunctionality at the planetary level comes from this kind of extractivist mentality that we've been practicing, where we can go into the earth and grab things and go into other people's lives and grab things and exploit this. And that comes, in my mind, from this effort to control the world and control each other. And so I see rewilding as an opportunity to release that grippingness and allow others to be others, and to allow us to be sensitive to the real differences that are out there and appreciate them, rather than look at everybody and everything as a resource for me to kind of gobble up or feed my ego or control so I can be comfortable. And I say that with lots of uncertainty, because, you know, what does rewilding mean in this moment with this pandemic? That to me is a mystery. Sorry to go on so long, but Maya just mentioned, I wrote this book called Is Wildness Over? And it's just about to come out, and I'm excited about it. So I could go on and on, but you don't want me to go on.
Len, do you have another question?
I do. I have a lot of great questions, and so I'm trying to figure out where to go next. I'm trying to find common themes across the questions that I've been asked, but there's a question from Leonard Cruz from trying to figure out how to navigate this question thing so I can see your names. The questions that I've gotten from Leonard Cruz, Melissa Hamerly, and Jessica Ketchum are, you know, relatively related. They're basically asking, first things first, we keep mentioning this concept of the classroom. And if this moment has obviated anything, it's that the classroom is wherever we decide we want to engage in learning, right? And I think that now that we have the privilege to be reminded of this, that we as educators should be encouraged to take full advantage of that. So one of my best friends, dearest friends, she is also an educator, but I was talking to her about some of the challenges that I had been experiencing initially and presently in teaching my sons, like how to, you know, keep them engaged, how to keep them motivated, how to keep myself motivated. And she said, well, you are now the teacher. Yes, there is, you know, material that you have to cover, or there's material that they are expected to cover, or material that they're expected to know, you know, once they return to school. But ultimately, why not lean into your own creativity? And this is something that I mentioned earlier, but why not lean into your own creativity and make the whole space, this whole time, the classroom? Why not make this a means, a a general resource that we can use to instruct the various things that they have to learn. What that would require, though, is for us, again, to have such an intimate relationship with what it is that we're teaching that we can seamlessly transition from one topic to the next and see how we can combine different topics. The reason, or the way that this relates to the other folks' questions that that I've been assigned to answer, that I've been asked directly, is that we're curious as to how we share these practices with our students. Do we pre-record things? Do we direct them to things that are already online? Do we recommend readings? Do we lead them through different practices? And the answer is yes. The answer is there is no one single best way to share these resources with students. The way that the best way is the way that works best for you. The best way is start with what you are most comfortable with. Start with, if there's something that you would feel comfortable leading them through, start with that. If there's writing prompts that you want to provide, start with that. There's online discussion boards. One of the things that I'm doing is I'll set the prompts for the online discussion boards in writing, but I'm asking students to respond to them via video, right? Via, just pushing a little video response thing so that way they can talk it out and not have to worry about, their spelling and accuracy and typing and all of these things like that. So, I mean, there's various ways that we can engage. The question that I would pose back to everyone is, at what point in our educational trajectory, or at what point along our trajectory in academia were we required to give up our creativity? At what point did we realize, or what point did we accept that the way things had been done previously is the way that things should be done? Whether it be adhering or addressing these competencies, whether it be, teaching the class the way that you had planned to teach it before you had to switch to teaching it online, nobody said that you have to teach it the exact same way. And if they did, now is the time to buck that and say, listen, that's not going to work. I said buck with a B. Now is the time where the way that you expected me to deliver this instruction is not going to work. So I have to dig into that creativity that I was maybe required to let go of along my academic trajectory. But now we got to get it back. We can be creative. We have it within us.
Great. This is a question from Ruth Thompson. How are you sharing mindfulness and other practices with your university students? I'm being very flexible and lenient. Sometimes I wonder if it's too lenient, but my students are not privileged and I worry about their financial situations, part-time jobs now lost, and general anxiety and fear for the future. The job market that won't be there when they graduate in spring, etc. Yeah, all of it. I guess what I would do, not a single thing, but just to be open to this evolving situation we're in. I mean, that it is going to keep changing, and I think I'd frame the practice by whatever it is you teach. But say if you're teaching some basic mindfulness practice, that I'd explain to them how it's been helpful in my own life in the way that being able to see what's going on in my mind has not only given me kind of like a still, quiet strength at core, and reduction in stress, but that it enables me to see more clearly what is happening right now, so you don't get lost in what you think might happen in the future. And also it allows a spaciousness to be able to see what your possibilities are. You know, you may need creativity if you're going to figure out how you can stay in school and you've just lost your job as a waitress, you know, and so what is next, you know? I mean, it's going to be hard for them. It's going to be hard for all of us going forward. And so I think that like acknowledging that and being appreciative of it, and at the same time offering the practices so that they can help them. Not that it's something being laid on them that they have to do, and you're not at a time when they're really stressed about the rest of their lives. No, it's like it will help them get through that in simple but really profound ways. And then I just like keep trying different things because, you know, and the center's is incredible, and all the different practices that have been developed for different kinds of students, different disciplines, and so on. You really have to, you know, sense your way into it and know that it's going to keep changing. I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, the first year I taught these students at Amherst, the first day, I taught them as if I was more used to teaching professors, you know. I taught them as if, yes, of course they would want to have lots of discussion about what they were experiencing. In fact, no, they did not want to say anything at all. And so I went through the day and I had left all this space for discussion, you know. And I went home that night where I thought, oh my God, you know, I've been teaching all these years. I thought I could teach anybody. But it turns out 18-year-olds at Amherst College are the hardest of all. So I stayed up all night thinking about what to do. And then the next day I focused on practices that weren't so subtle. Close your eyes and watch your breath, or, you know. And one of the things I did was I gave them each a rock stone, you know, and then I had them look at it, and then just as their mind wandered off, bring it back. And as it wandered off again, bring it back, and keep looking at the stone even after they thought they had seen it, you know. Anyhow, and then I didn't leave any time for discussion. When that was over, I said, okay, we're going on to the next thing. There's this football player in the back of the room who in my mind, could have been a cartoon of the most resistant person to these practices, you know. And he raised his hand, and I said, yeah, and he said, could I say something? I said, definitely, you can say anything you want. He said, I love my rock. And then the whole thing opened up. And he said, I love my rock too. So, you know, don't get caught in feeling like one thing that you're teaching is what you're supposed to be doing. Explore and help them explore with you. Yeah.
We're kind of running out of time, but I'll jump in with a couple. I'm gonna combine a couple questions.
Oh,
but,
yeah. 3 minutes. Yeah.
So I want to just draw. So the question that's some people are asking about their own selfishness at this moment. How can I be more generous? Questioning whether they're being as full as they can. And I'll just draw a quick analogy. An amazing thing is happening on the planet now as the human critter quiets down. And people are saying, you know, in New York City, they can hear birdsong now. And it's not that the birds are coming back. It's not that quick, but what's been in the background is now being able to come a little bit into the foreground. And this kind of quietness and the kind of hushness that's sort of enveloping the planet now is kind of an analogy, I think, for this question about selfishness, which is that the person asking, I wish I could be more generous. Is it common for us to be self-focused right now? And I would say, I don't even know. I don't think we even know what selfishness means right now. I don't think we know what the self, well, we never know what the self means, right? But
Where's the
especially,
self?
what's self, right? bye. No, but basically, I think that, that phrase you just used, Mirabai, I love my rock. Well, can we love what is right now? Can we just love what is right now? Not in a Pollyanna way, but to recognize our limitations, of generosity, to recognize our limitations of self-care. But the last thing I think we want to do is to hold ourselves to standards that first don't make sense anymore, and secondly, to hold ourselves to standards that deplete us rather than affirm our lives.
Great. Well, in the last minute, I want to make sure to say that we really want to hear from you. We originally designed this because we're trying to figure out what the center can offer to all of you that would be really helpful. So please write to info@contemplativemind.org, and either with questions or also with suggestions. And even if you don't know what it is you need, tell us the confusion around what you think you need. We really want to hear what we can do right now, because we can't do the big in-person things that we're really good at doing. So we'd like to hear what will help you.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Mirabai. And I think that's a great place to end today's time together. I want to thank you, Lenwood, Paul, and Mirabai, for sharing your insights with us today, and for really sharing your realness and your humanness as well. I want to remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded and it will be available on the website soon. Our webinars are made possible by your support, so we invite you to make a donation and check out our extensive webinar archive at www.contemplativemind.org. I also just want to quickly mention that we're going to be offering a CMind practice webinar led by Richard Chess on Wednesday, April 15th. You can find out more about that on our website as well. So thank you again, all of you, and thank you everyone for listening and joining us today. Be well.
Love being with you, all 250 of you.